Ford F-150 has been the best-selling vehicle in America for 49 years straight. Not the best-selling truck, the best-selling anything. It has outsold every sedan, every SUV, every hatchback Detroit has built since Ronald Reagan's first term in office. And in 2026, the average buyer signing the paperwork on a new one can no longer actually afford it. Nearly 1 in 5 new vehicle loans in America now cost more than $1,000 a month, and the 3 trucks driving that number are the same 3 trucks that built the entire industry. The most American vehicle on the road just became the most expensive mistake in the driveway. So how did America's most protected, most popular vehicle become unaffordable to the very people it was built for? Start in 1948. Ford rolls out the F-Series, a bare-bones haulier built for farmers and contractors who needed something tougher than a car and cheaper than a commercial rig. No leather, no air conditioning, just a frame, an engine, and a bed. It was a tool, priced like a tool. 16 years later, in 1964, an unrelated trade fight over European chicken tariffs handed Detroit something it never had to ask for. President Lyndon Johnson slapped a 25% tariff on imported light trucks in retaliation. Call it the chicken tax. That's a tariff that taxes any foreign-made pickup at 10 times the rate of a foreign-made car, and it mattered here because it sealed off the one product category import competition might have kept honest. Toyota could sell you a Camry. Toyota could not sell you a cheap truck. By 1975, Ford had found the sweet spot between its light F-100 and its heavy-duty F-250, and the F-150 was born. Buyers who felt torn between too small and too much finally had the truck built for exactly them. It sold immediately, and it kept selling. For years, this was the deal. Americans got a genuinely useful, relatively affordable machine. Detroit got a fortress nobody outside North America was allowed to challenge on price. But it wasn't long before someone at Ford noticed that a tool nobody else could undercut didn't have to stay priced like a tool. In 1978, the F-150 got its first Lariat trim, air conditioning, leather, power windows, options nobody's grandfather asked for on a work truck. It was a small change. Nobody called it a turning point. But the fortress built to protect a cheap, useful truck had just discovered it could sell something else entirely. By 1981, the F-Series had done something no truck had ever done. It didn't just beat every other truck on the market, it beat every car too, overtaking the Oldsmobile Cutlass to become the single best-selling vehicle in America. It has not given up that title since. 49 consecutive years and counting. Over 41 million F-Series trucks have rolled off the line since 1948, one leaving the factory roughly every 50 seconds at peak production. The category around it grew just as fast. In 2010, passenger cars still made up more than half of every new vehicle sold in the United States. By 2024, that had flipped almost completely. Trucks and SUVs claimed 75% of the market, a record. In 2025, out of roughly 16.2 million new vehicles sold nationwide, only 2.4 million were passenger cars. The other 12.3 million were light trucks. Sedans didn't lose market share. They got replaced. Every automaker watched the same chart. Every automaker drew the same conclusion. The chicken tax meant nobody undercut them on price. The footprint rule, a fuel economy standard that graded bigger vehicles on a curve, meant nobody punished them for size either. Detroit had built a category with a price floor nobody could break and a size ceiling nobody enforced. That combination was too good to leave alone. Somewhere between the Lariat trim in 1978 and the fully loaded leather-wrapped 12-inch touchscreen trucks rolling out of Dearborn and Detroit today, the F-150 stopped being a tool that happened to be popular. It became something else. A decision got made about what the American truck was actually for, and it wasn't hauling lumber. Here's the choice, stated plainly. Automakers didn't wake up one day and discover Americans only wanted trucks. They spent 2 decades making it structurally difficult to buy anything else. GM discontinued its sedans one by one. Ford killed off the Fusion, the Taurus, and the Focus, and told the market, almost proudly, that its car lineup going forward would be 2 vehicles, the Mustang and whatever crossover happened to be selling that year. Stellantis let entire Chrysler and Dodge sedan nameplates die of neglect. It was sold as giving the customer what the customer wanted. It was actually a margin decision. A base sedan might clear a few $1,000s of profit per unit after incentives. A loaded F-150 Platinum, a Silverado High Country, a Ram Limited regularly clears 15 to 20,000. Same factory, same labour cost, wildly different math. And because the chicken tax meant no Korean or Japanese automaker could ship in a cheaper alternative to compete it down, there was no external pressure forcing prices back toward the tool the F-150 started as. So the trim ladder kept climbing. XL became XLT, became Lariat, became King Ranch, became Platinum. Silverado added High Country. Ram added Limited and Tungsten. Each rung added leather, screens, sound systems, and driver assistance suites, none of it changing what the truck could actually haul, all of it changing what the truck cost. Basework trucks still technically exist on paper. Dealers rarely stock them. Buyers walk onto a lot looking for the truck their father drove and get steered, trim by trim, toward the one with the biggest margin. Nobody forced anyone into a $75,000 pickup, but nobody built them an easy way to buy the $35,000 one either. The first crack showed up in the numbers, quietly, the way cracks usually do. By March 2026, Kelley Blue Book put the average transaction price of a new full-size pickup at $65,964. That's up 2.8% from a year earlier. The average price of a new vehicle overall, every sedan, hatchback, SUV, and truck combined, was $49,275. The gap between the two, over $16,000, is roughly the size of the premium buyers now pay just to sit in a truck bed rather than a trunk. And the rate of increase wasn't just high, it was accelerating. Truck prices barely moved through most of 2025. Then January 2026 came in up 1.9% year over year. February jumped to 3.4%. March hit 3.5%. 3 months, 3 record highs, each one bigger than the last. Buyers adapted the only way they could. Average loan terms on new vehicles stretched to 69.5 months, nearly 6 years of payments on an asset that starts losing value the moment it leaves the lot. Nearly a third of everyone trading in a vehicle in early 2026 was doing it underwater, owing an average of $7,183, more than the car was worth. That's not a rounding error. That's an entire generation of buyers rolling old debt into new debt just to keep driving something they need for work. The price of the truck hadn't just outpaced the price of everything else on the lot. It had started outpacing what a stretched loan term and a buried trade-in could quietly absorb. And the two forces that had shielded the truck market for 60 years, the chicken tax keeping foreign competition out, and the footprint rule keeping size unpunished, were about to be joined by a third force nobody in Dearborn or Detroit had asked for. In April 2025, the Trump administration imposed a 25% tariff on vehicles imported into the United States, plus a wave of tariffs on the steel, aluminum and copper that go into building one, whether that truck is imported or not. By June, the steel and aluminum tariffs had climbed to 50%. By July, copper joined them at the same rate. Automakers absorbed what they could at first. General Motors earnings reports through most of 2025 showed the company eating the extra cost, rather than passing it to buyers, but that only works for so long. By October, the industry had paid out an estimated $10.6 billion in tariff-related duties, on top of a running total north of $35 billion since the tariffs first took effect. Vehicles built entirely on American soil still rose $1,600 to $2,000 in cost, purely from pricier steel, aluminum, and parts. Imported models got hit even harder, with some rising $5,000 to $8,900 in a single model year. The White House later carved out exemptions for USMCA-compliant trucks built in Mexico and Canada, softening the blow on some models. But the metals tariffs remained, and metal is most of what a truck is made of. Cox Automotive's chief economist put it simply, heading into 2026, prices will rise and volumes will decline. His firm projected new vehicle prices to climb another 4 to 8% through the end of the year, on top of the roughly 10% jump the industry had already absorbed in 2025. None of this was Detroit's fault exactly, but it landed on a market that had spent 60 years training buyers, to expect the price of a truck to only ever move in one direction. There was no discount coming to cushion the blow. There was only the next number. Here's what made it worse. Faced with a genuine affordability crisis, the instinct inside Detroit wasn't to build cheaper. It was to protect the margin that had made trucks the most profitable vehicles in the American market for decades. Base trims kept shrinking on dealer lots. Advertising kept pushing the loaded versions. The Wall Street Journal ran a headline in early 2026 that said it plainly, 1 million new car buyers are gone, and they're not coming back soon. Total US new vehicle sales, which had run above 17 million a year as recently as 2020, were on pace to land closer to 16 million. Meanwhile, a small electric vehicle startup called Slate quietly proved the demand for a genuinely cheap truck had never gone away. Its base model launched with a starting price of $24,950, no infotainment screen, manual windows, a phone mount instead of a dashboard display. It was stripped down, almost defiantly, back to the original 1948 idea of a truck as a tool. More than 160,000 people put down deposits before it had even shipped a single unit. That number should have been a warning shot to Ford, GM, and Stellantis. Instead, it read more like a curiosity, a niche play from an outsider with no factory history and no dealer network to protect. The legacy automakers kept their strategy exactly where it was: fewer base trims, more loaded ones, and a bet that the buyer who couldn't afford the truck anymore would simply take out a longer loan instead of asking for a cheaper one. They weren't wrong that people would keep buying. They were wrong about what that buying would eventually cost them, and the bill was already sitting in a database at Experian, waiting to be counted. On May 28, 2026, Experian Automotive released the number that turned an abstract affordability story into a headline. Nearly 1 in 5 new vehicle loans in the United States now carries a monthly payment of $1,000 or more. A year earlier, that figure sat at 17.4%. The average amount financed for a new vehicle had climbed to an all-time high of $43,952. The average monthly payment had climbed with it to $770. Here's the detail that made the story personal instead of abstract. The top vehicle models most commonly financed at that $1,000 plus tier weren't luxury cars. They were popular pickup trucks, the Ford F-150, the Chevrolet Silverado 1500, the Ram 1500. The same 3 trucks that had defined American car culture for half a century were now the same 3 trucks quietly pushing their buyers into 4-figure monthly payments. The delinquency numbers followed the same direction. By the first quarter of 2026, 5.6% of all outstanding auto debt in the country was at least 90 days past due, up 12.2% from a year earlier, according to the New York Fed. Near-prime borrowers, the buyers with decent but not great credit, the ones most likely to be financing a well-optioned pickup rather than a base model, were carrying some of the highest payments of any credit tier at $811 a month on average. Even the used truck market wasn't a safe fallback anymore. The share of used car buyers facing a $1,000 plus monthly payment climbed to 6.3% by the end of 2025, up from 5.4% the year before. Picture a typical near-prime buyer financing a well-optioned Silverado this year. On paper, they qualify. In practice, that qualification arrives wrapped around an $811 payment stretched across 6 years, before insurance, before maintenance, before a single mile of the truck's actual work has been done. That's not a subprime borrower who overreached. That's the median buyer the industry now considers ordinary. The truck that was supposed to be the affordable, reliable choice for a working family had become the single most common vehicle behind the country's 4-figure car payment problem, not despite being popular, because of it. To be fair, the industry has tried something. Ford's Maverick, a compact truck built on a car platform, starts under $25,000 and delivers close to 37 miles per gallon in its hybrid form. Hyundai's Santa Cruz plays a similar game. Small, road-oriented, priced for a buyer who wants truck utility without truck-sized payments. Both have sold reasonably well. Neither has moved the needle on the actual affordability crisis, because neither is a full-size truck, and the segment everyone actually means when they say truck, the F-150S, The Silverados, the Rams, hasn't gotten any cheaper to make room for them. Even the compact segment isn't as cheap as the sticker headlines suggest. By June 2026, the average transaction price for a small or mid-sized pickup had climbed to $42,987, nearly double the Maverick starting price, because buyers keep optioning their way up the same trim ladder that inflated the full-size trucks in the first place. Slate's stripped-down electric truck remains the most genuine attempt at a fix, and it's still an attempt, not a result. Deliveries were only scheduled to begin in late 2026. Whether 160,000 reservations convert into actual sales, whether Slate can scale production without either raising the price or running out of money, is still an open question with no answer yet on the books. Meanwhile, the base XL and work trim versions of the F150 and Silverado, the ones priced closer to $35,000 than $65,000, still technically exist on paper. Dealers just don't stock them in meaningful numbers, because a lot sitting on a base trim earns less per unit than one sitting on a Platinum. The fix that would actually work, building and stocking more affordable full-size trucks, is the one option Detroit hasn't seriously tried. Chapter 9. As of the middle of 2026, the numbers are still moving in one direction. Full-size truck prices are rising faster than the overall market, not slower. Loan terms keep stretching. The share of buyers paying 4 figures a month keeps climbing. And despite all of it, unit sales of full-size pickups are still projected to edge up in 2026 to roughly 3.1 million trucks from 3 million the year before. That's the part that should unsettle Detroit more than it does. The industry has learned it doesn't need to fix affordability to keep moving volume. Buyers just absorb it. By the time you're watching this, the exact percentages may have shifted, but the shape of the story almost certainly hasn't. The F-150 will probably still be America's best-selling vehicle when this video goes up. It might hold that title for another decade, protected by the same tariff wall that's kept it there since 1964, unbothered by fuel economy rules built around its own size. But best-selling and affordable stopped being the same sentence a long time ago, and the gap between those two words is where millions of American buyers now live, stretched across 6-year loans, buried in negative equity, paying 4 figures a month for a machine their grandfather bought in cash. The F-150 was sold as the affordable, reliable choice for the American worker. It was actually the highest margin product a shielded, tariff-protected industry had ever built, engineered trim by trim to extract exactly as much as a captive market would tolerate. Millions of Americans didn't stop wanting trucks. They ran out of room to keep paying for one. The bed is still empty. The payment is what's actually full. If an industry protected from competition for 60 years still found a way to price out its own most loyal customers, it raises an uncomfortable question about what happens in the parts of the economy that never had any protection in the first place. That's a story for another video.